We're going to be looking at Screwtape's Topical Guide to Temptation, an A to Z analysis. But you say, and this is actually my favorite topic, but you may be thinking, well, wait a minute, isn't misquotes my favorite topic? After all, that's what people maybe know me more as. But I like misquotes in the same spirit that Lewis spoke about, which I'll go into some detail in a few minutes, about the Screwtape letters, that it was fun at first, but gets kind of dry and boring after a while. That is the misquotes. And then Lewis, I'll have a quote or two about that and his thoughts. But also something I've been devoting my time to more recently. Well, first of all, there is, cards for the website. Your handout has that. But some of you may be familiar with something called Asperger's syndrome. That is now called just autism level 1. And so I was actually diagnosed with that. And so I've been doing some 60-second videos and some other things on a different YouTube channel. There's a card about that. So for those of you who have known me for years and wondered, why is he a little off? Now you know. Now you know. But anyway, so my title here, so we're not going to get through the entire alphabet. And I did get the handouts to you, so you may have had a chance to look at it. So the handout is not a duplicate of what I'm presenting. It will have certain aspects of it. But why focus on the Screwtape letters? Oh, let's see. Here we go. Well, there is a letter that talks about the fact that just before Lewis died, this was his most popular book. Nowadays, if you talk to someone, they, of course, know Narnia, and the Screwtape letters may not necessarily be. This letter is to someone who, if you're familiar with Tim Keller, this is Tim Keller's wife, but as a child, she wrote to Lewis, and he wrote back. I didn't double check to see if she had commented about the Screwtape letters, but the response notes that it was one of his most popular books. In fact, when Lewis died, what did they talk about in the headline? Author of the Screwtape letters. Well, how did this come to be, briefly? If you didn't know, 3 years before Narnia first came out, Lewis was on the cover of Time magazine. Why was he on the cover of Time magazine? Well, a new book was coming out, but his fame was such from the Screwtape letters that he got on the cover. Miracles was the book that was coming out, by the way. Here's just another alternative picture, a little more realistic. I don't have a copy. If anyone, Christmas is what I think you have on the table. Christmas is 100 and something, 60 days. That would make a great Christmas gift for anyone that loves Lewis. So when the Screwtape letters came out in The Guardian, first of all, before it became a book, it was in 1941, just approximately a year before. And it came out without any fanfare in the sense that there was no explanation. Here you see highlighted that what page it is on, and it just simply had the Screwtape letters, the first one, and people were kind of caught out unexpectedly, and we'll have a quote from Lewis regarding that later on. But as noted, I done what I'd like to call an enhanced study guide, or it says here, companion and study guide to the Screwtape letters. I have a few copies with me. They're not signed, but I'm happy to sign them. $15. The misquote book is for $10. I've got more copies of that, just trying to get rid of that one. No. But so as I'm speaking, it won't necessarily be on all the slides, but I have, in terms of referencing the different themes, which I haven't quite clearly said, that so you have certain letters and there's a main theme in certain letters, but he will talk about different things throughout the letters. And so that's one of the things, in addition to a study guide to each of the letters, I did a topical glossary. And so I referenced the letter as well as the paragraph. So if you see in the book or in your handout, and I think I kept the paragraph that explained it, if it says like 4.2, it's the fourth letter, the second paragraph. And has anyone seen the Screwtape play by Max McLean? Show of hands. So excellent, a play. Max actually endorsed the book. I just reached out to him. He accepted my friend request on Facebook and sent him a copy, and he endorsed it. So Just wanted to mention that. But also something I did fail to mention, don't raise your hand, but I was going to joke and say, okay, if anyone hasn't read the Screwtape letters, you need to leave the room because we're going to spoil it for you. And in fact, in the introduction to the book, I note that Lewis discouraged someone who wrote to him about doing an index, which is essentially along the lines of what my topical glossary is. So I very clearly say, first and foremost, read the Screwtape letters for what it is, enjoy it, appreciate the humor in it. It's the old getting past watchful dragons, if you're familiar with Lewis, the expression. And then as you're wanting to dive deeper into it and understand some of the many layers that you can appreciate it even more, because a lot of Christians don't realize, okay, this is kind of demonstrating a unique angle to the spiritual warfare that Ephesians 6 talks about. My website is on the back of the handout that you have. And speaking of the handout, just real briefly, there's a different color page in the middle here. I took from my book the main themes for each of the letters. So that's a nice little separate takeaway that I have extra copies too on the table if you wanted to pick up. I maybe have a few extra of these, but anyway, some different things to take away. But one of the things I did fail to mention, which I have highlighted, is the podcast. I forgot to put the address for that. That was what, after I had the website, around the same time the podcast started. And on YouTube, I decided to, how many different names can I come up with to keep people confused and go, okay, now if I go here, what's the name of it? Anyway, who knows why. Sometimes it's practical label, like on Twitter or X, you can't have a long name, so it's Essential Lewis. And then Facebook, those are two of the groups that I have. So let's consider, if you haven't maybe read the Screwtape letters for a while, let's just kind of get a few of the players on the board. The most famous, of course, is Screwtape himself. He is the key, of course, to the entire book. He's the undersecretary and a senior demon, and he wants to advise his nephew, the nephew, of course, being Wormwood. He's a junior tempter, and he wants to be a better devil. So Wormwood is told about various tools and techniques to use to mess with his patient. Then the patient, and these are entries, I realize you can't read all these. I believe I kept some of them in the handout. But we don't know much about the patient, which is deliberate. This is supposed to be somewhat of an everyman, so you can relate to the person. Even though it was written in mid-1940, that it still, can speak to us today. I remember reading it, and Lewis, of course, weaves in a lot of things that, if you're very well read, which I never claim to be, then you will appreciate even more. But he does it in such a great way that even if you're not familiar, it never got distracting to me. Yeah, so we don't know much about the patient. We know he's old enough to be in the military, and that he's a close relationship with his mother, and in the 21st letter that he is beginning to date. The enemy, of course, is God. Our Father below is how Screwtape refers to Satan. So as noted already, it's a topical glossary is the other feature in the book, and so I'm focusing in on that. And on the YouTube channel, I've been doing some YouTube shorts, if you're not too familiar, shorts, or orient it to your phone orientation as opposed to, this way. And they're just 60 seconds. So I've been doing Screwtape Saturdays, and usually then that is just one of the themes. It might be a couple parts, and then occasionally then I'll group 5 of them together. That's what I released earlier today. So if you were to go to the channel, it's featuring numbers 11 through 15, which we'll be actually talking about today. But in terms of just a quick look at some of the themes that you can read about, and some of them are in your sample. I don't expect you to read this, but how prayer can be twisted to hell's advantages. These are just giving some examples. Then fear, how it can be used along with suffering to hinder spiritual growth. How virtue can be made ineffective in a person's life. Then Lewis will throw in some new things that either he created or he pulled from another source. The law of undulation, the ups and downs, the peaks and valleys we may refer to it as. Letter 11 talks about the causes of laughter and how it can be used or distorted to hinder spiritual growth. Humility is mainly spoken about in the 14th letter, but he makes a reference to it in the second letter, if you can see on the screen here. 2.4 meaning letter 2, paragraph 4, and then also obviously in 14. Then in the 29th letter, it's in the 5th paragraph. So those are some features that as you appreciated Screwtape for what it is, the humor in it, and you're wanting to even appreciate it more, the resource, the things I'll be talking about today can help you with that, as well as if you were to get a copy of the book. Gluttony, Lewis, of course, does a very unique twist on that. If you've read the book, you remember it. But so let's go ahead then and look at some of those themes as a topical guide to temptation. Let's analyze or speak about some of the ways that Screwtape instructs his junior demon, Wormwood. So this was the third feature. And so with it, we find, and this first one just happens to be the first letter. I'm not going through every numbered letter, but hitting the theme alphabetically, anything that has a major entry. But as we're looking at argument, we find it in the first paragraph, and we learn that argument is not a good way to keep someone out of God's hands. This is because people no longer thinking with doing. That's really even more so today, isn't it? Unfortunately. A more effective method is jargon. Wormwood is told to avoid argument, and in the second paragraph, he says, quote, that argument moves the whole struggle onto the enemy's own ground. Plus, by arguing, a person's reason is awakened and could result in a patient, quote, attending to universal issues and withdrawing his attention from the stream of immediate sense experiences. So, don't use argument, jargon is better. Then we find at the end of the 7th letter that it's also brought up in relation to their faith, and that to argue for something is often useful for hell's causes. And so that's something that Screwtape says you can twist. The 21st and 27th letter also deals with argument, and he gives some advice about it, and the latter, the 27th letter, talks about it in relation to prayer. Then change is also a theme that Screwtape says, hey, we can use that to our advantage. And he says this first in the 8th letter, and it's in relation to the topic of time. For humans, quote, in the second paragraph of letter 8, their bodies, their passions, and imaginations are in continual change. Change is used several other times in an ordinary sense, but the more details and the unique sense appear in the 25th letter. So here the subject of time is revisited when discussing the horror of the same old thing. Screwtape points out that people, quote, experience reality successively and thus must experience change. That's in the second paragraph to letter 25. However, Screwtape notes, and speaking of noting things, in the original preface to the Screwtape letters, Lewis notes you can't always trust what Screwtape says. It may not always be true, but oftentimes there are things when he's complaining about God, he actually does reveal accurately certain things. But you got to be very careful as you're reading it to kind of see if it's presenting it in the twisted way, but yet it's still true in the sense of applying it in a straightforward way. But anyway, he notes that God has balanced the love of change with the love of permanence. And this union is referred to as rhythm. Then anything that is capitalized means there's another entry. When you interrupt this rhythm, Wormwood is encouraged to twist the desire for change into a demand for absolute novelty. And so this involves isolating a pleasure and making it into a vice, like gluttony is the example that's given. Then by the conclusion of the letter, Lewis writes, and Wormwood learns, another way normal change has been twisted by hell. They have, as Screwtape presents it, quote, substituted the emotional adjective stagnant in place of the descriptive adjective unchanged. Unchanged being a more neutral word, but stagnant sounds so negative. Charity. How can Screwtape twist charity to his advantage? Well, Wormwood is told about charity 19 times actually in the letters. They are essentially passing references in the 4th, 6th, 7th, and 11th letters. But then in the 14th letter, Screwtape warns that God wants to give humans, quote, a new kind of love that involves charity and gratitude. This is in the 4th paragraph of the 14th letter. And that is for everyone, including themselves. Screwtape then states that God loves the people he created, but he later gets into trouble with his superiors because of this confession. Also in the same paragraph, the 4th one. Then in the 26th letter, 4 out of the 5 paragraphs mention charity. So some of this involves encouraging replacing the notion of charity with unselfishness. Not doing something instead of focusing on action is what unselfishness is. And you may recall that there is an essay, I believe it's at the beginning, that Lewis talks about this as well. But this is related to keeping things out, which was a main theme that I meant to note at the very beginning, but in previous times when I've spoke about Screwtape, I noted that in my book I discovered, in researching and studying the Screwtape letters, that there was a theme of keeping things out, either mentioned directly or indirectly in 3/4 of the letter, as well as in the follow-up essay Toast. And so that's something the podcast version is up, and you can listen to that as well. But chastity then, well, of course, we can figure out pretty easily how hell can use chastity to their advantage, but let's look at some of the ways that Screwtape notes it. So while mentioning it several times, charity is worth noting in the 19th, 21st, and 30th letters. Screwtape suggests that in the 19th letter, the 3rd paragraph, producing casual unchastity is not likely for gullible and emotional individuals. He also tells Wormwood that, quote, resistance to chastity comes from, close quote, and then I'm paraphrasing Lewis here through Screwtape, a twisted view of ownership about a person's own body. That's in the 4th paragraph of the 21st letter. Finally, in relation to fatigue, chastity is brought up as one of the virtues someone is likely to surrender just before temptation is about to end. That's in the 2nd paragraph of the 30th letter. There's no direct quote up there, but just the theme there from the, that's noted there. Choices, you can imagine, various ways that the devil can twist that in one's life. The theme is mentioned in relation to habits and the future. Initially, we find this in the 12th letter, and choices are a more general reference. Wormwood is warned not to hurry the patient. That's in the 1st paragraph. That is when a change of direction more favorable to them is introduced. It's best to have a person view these choices only as minor and something that could easily be reversed. The concept is brought up again then in the 25th letter in the 6th paragraph. And this is when Screwtape is discussing the future. He boasts that humans do not know what will happen and that what the future will be depends very largely on the choices which are now made. The Toast essay also brings this up in the 10th paragraph about helping individuals to harden their choices of the hellward roads into a habit by steady repetition. So the more you repeat something that seems at first to be a minor choice, like, this is kind of deviating, but it can get progressively worse. And so hell can use that to their advantage. The church, surely Screwtape can't impact the church. All right, what are some ways that Lewis observes through the voice of Screwtape? Well, so in the 2nd letter, the 2nd paragraph, he notes that the church is listed as one of hell's greatest allies. Surprise on that one here. But he's not talking about the real church, but places, as mentioned in the 16th letter, where a church is a kind of club. We could probably spend hours on that point, but we will not. Then in the 7th letter, and I hope you know your Roman numerals, okay. He admits that the real church is heavily defended, but factions can develop like the parties of Paul and of Apollos, which is, of course, a clear reference to 1 Corinthians 3:4. Some individuals, complain, oh, Lewis doesn't talk about the Bible. I saw a post in one of the many Lewis groups, and someone, I think they said they were reading Mere Christianity and they just couldn't get into it because he doesn't mention the Bible. Well, he makes allusions to it, and of course, if you've read it, you understand the audience Lewis was speaking to. He was not speaking to assuming people were to be Christians and taking the Bible as an authority. So that is, of course, why he did what he did. But now in the 16th letter, we learn there is a concern that the patient has only been attending one church. Wormwood is told that it's best to have a person looking for the church that best suits him than to settle for going to just one place. That is, unless it's due to indifference. All right, what about courage? How can courage be twisted to hell's advantage? Courage is initially mentioned in the 4th letter. He tells Wormwood when referencing prayer that he can use a subtler misdirection, this is in the 3rd paragraph, to make virtue ineffective. In letter 7, courage is mentioned in relation to pacifism. Then later in the 29th letter, courage is addressed in greater detail. This is in the 2nd paragraph. Screwtape admits that hell can't yet produce any virtue. Yet without virtues like courage, at which the enemy supplies, obviously God, this is in the 8th paragraph of the 29th letter, there would not be someone like Attila. Wormwood is warned against using cowardice because it runs the risk of producing a self-awareness that might lead to, dramatic pause, repentance and humility. That's in the 5th paragraph. And also then in this letter, in the 6th paragraph, we find Screwtape proclaiming, quote, courage is not simply one of the virtues, but is the form of every virtue at the testing point, which means at the point of highest reality. Then get into cowardice more directly. In the context, the root cause, in the context of the root causes of laughter in the 11th letter, Wormwood is told that mere cowardice is shameful, but it can be justified and considered funny when it is boasted with humorous exaggerations and grotesque gestures. Then later in the 29th letter, Screwtape debates whether cowardice is their best weapon within the context of war. In our world today, this is very relevant with what we have going on. He notes that of all the vices, it is purely painful. And so humans can't get any enjoyment out of it, unlike hatred. As we see here from the 29th letter, hatred does have its pleasures. Hence, the devil's use of cowardice is a ticklish business because it is impossible to make men proud of it, unlike most other vices. So in the end, Screwtape admits that there is the danger of inducing cowardice, which runs the risk of losing as much as you gain. So a delicate balancing act, All right, democracy. If you've read Screwtape letters closely, you may go, wait a minute, he doesn't talk about democracy. Well, he does in the Toast essay, okay? So, and in terms of the Toast essay, I want to note that, which I do have a original copy of the Saturday Evening Post that you can look at during the break if you do it very carefully. And this Toast essay is 5 times the length of the average Screwtape letter. And it's very worth reading. Some editions, I mean, it didn't take a survey, but many editions do now include it. There was an official second preface that was made before Lewis died, and that included it. Sometimes that second preface is now in the end of it. But anyway, nevertheless, democracy is what I wanted to note about here. The first comment is made just before the middle of his address, where he remarks the perfect democracy, which is where only the state religion is permitted. And he's going to tie in education, which I'll get to in a moment. And if you didn't know, there was a preface to the toast essay itself. You are in common company, or that's a common thing that's not known, or it's not commonly known is the best way to present that. So he did a preface that was only published in 1982 and is not too easily found. I will share some of that, time permitting. I am going to try to have some Q&A time. But make sure I got it synchronized here. Next thing there. The Screwtape admits that democracy is properly the name of a political system, even a system of voting. This is in the 19th paragraph, but it is important that the word is never given a clear and definable meaning. Screwtape is even told, or is even so bold as to proclaim that tempters are merely using the word purely as an incantation. That's in the 20th paragraph, to keep humans to do things that, if undefined by the magic word, would be undefended by the magic word, would be universally derided. Screwtape then underscores that democracy is associated with the political idea that men should be equally treated, and this can be transformed into, quote, a belief that all men are equal. This will tie into education here in a few minutes. This leads to the resentment of every kind of superiority to others, and that, quote, every mere difference is a claim to superiority. This is how, the devil can kind of twist things to their advantage. Thus, others have no business of being different. It's undemocratic. Has anyone heard John Cleese do the reading for the Screwtape letters? It's very rare now. In fact, there's a new podcast looking at the Screwtape letters, Uncovering Evil in Our Time, I think is the subtitle. And they're actually sharing that audio because it's not available for sale, so I guess that's how you can get away with that. But they found that a couple of the letters that weren't in the original edition, because they were on cassettes, and it was just longer than the 3 hours, I think. Nevertheless, the essay is definitely not available. Years ago, I found it, and I sorted through my material, and I noticed, I still have that somewhere. But it's very interesting to hear John Cleese. So there's a few people I've talked to that they didn't care for it, but many individuals really appreciate it. So let's see, then this results then, when you throw out, it's undemocratic. This results in a push to put down everyone else to their own level. And this leads to the discrediting, finally, the elimination of every kind of human excellence. Screwtape also reveals that mindset can work itself into the education system. As I noted, going to talk about that in a few minutes. But let's spend a moment on despair. That's a fun topic, right? Despair? Despair is mentioned several times in the letters, but the first key instance is in the 9th letter, where in the 3rd paragraph, Screwtape explores how to advise Wormwood, depending on whether his patient is of the desponding type or of the wishful thinking type. In letter 28, it's called Quiet Despair, the first paragraph, when Wormwood is told to make sure the patient has a long life. Then in the 29th letter, despair is mentioned as an emotion that can be produced by aggravating shame. Here, Wormwood is informed that despair, and this is a quote, if you've heard some quotes from the Screwtape letters, this would be one. At least it stands out in my mind, maybe it hadn't in yours, but despair is a greater sin than any of the sin which provoke it. And finally, despair is also mentioned in the 30th letter. I have no other thing to share about that. And again, in Screwtape proposes a toast essay, but there are some additional things there. Disappointment, equally exciting topic, right? Who likes to be no, I won't get a show of hands here. We don't like to be disappointed. It's first mentioned in the second letter. This is what Screwtape notes. The patient will experience, this during his first few weeks as a churchman, as a Christian, in the third paragraph. Wormwood is told that the enemy, of course, which is God, permits disappointments as a means for a person to grow, meaning that they'll be much less dependent on emotion. Then it's brought up in the 15th letter about the patient being untroubled about the future. In the 5th paragraph, the patient might feel this way because he has false hopes about it, and this will result in a letdown, piling up the disappointments, as you see underscored there. 2 letters later, in the 17th, Screwtape then describes the patient's mother's gluttony and how her lack of being satisfied leads to her, quote, daily disappointment, which results in others becoming angry at her. And in my book, I give a few other places where disappointment is found. Distraction. No one gets distracted, right? See, what was I talking about? This is something the devils try to do quite frequently. Screwtape gives an example in the first letter, as you may recall. He's reflecting on his days as a tempter. I don't recall if anyone has maybe tried to do this was Screwtape's early days, who would have written to him, but that would be an interesting little paper. He tells of distracting the patient with the idea of lunch. He doesn't use the word distraction, but it's obvious that that's what he's referencing. The first time it appears then is in a discussion, the word actually itself, of prayer in the 12th letter, where Wormwood is reminded that his patient is currently almost begging you to distract his purpose and benumb his heart. Later in the 23rd letter, Screwtape recommends this tactic to distract men's mind from who Jesus is and what he did. That's in the 3rd paragraph. Then in the 25th letter, he mentions the use of fashions to keep people's minds or their attention from more important matters. Of course, that's not a problem today. Let's substitute fashions with social media, right? You get the latest news, what's happening, but in terms of back in the 1940s, that was the thing that would be the most to distract. Finally, there's also another mention about distraction in the 27th letter, which I'm not going to touch on. Okay, education. All right, some extra stuff that I did include in my original Screwtape Saturday. But when talking about education, Lewis, in the Lost preface, which is in this edition of the Screwtape letters, it says revised edition, the definitive edition. And I should do radio, the definitive edition. So it includes the never before. So here's an excerpt to where these are Lewis's words. The toast was published in an American magazine, Saturday Evening Post, American magazine. The tendency in education which I was deploring has gone further in America than anywhere else. If I had been writing straight, my article would have been an attack on the public schools in America. It would indeed have raised nothing that educated Americans did not fully admit. Then Lewis goes on to say, and I don't know if I read all of that, but basically says that it's one thing for them to say these things in their own country, but another to hear them said by a foreigner. So Lewis is saying that in the toast essay, and you can follow along up there if you want to read more of it, but that he has Screwtape speaking of the English, but he says that America has gone further, and so he was really referencing America, but he didn't want to say that because he didn't want people to get all bent out of shape. My words, bent out of shape part. So he says at the end, the most intelligent of my America's readers would have, I hope, seen the game I was playing and enjoyed the joke that even though Screwtape was moaning about the English system, education in America was further down that rabbit hole. And aren't you glad it didn't go any further? All right, so in the toast thing here, then the one of the main themes is on education. In fact, in this lost preface that again published in '82, it says 1962 was when he wrote it. I cross-checked with experts better than me. Actually, there was a third one I didn't check with, but anyway, a couple people to say, hey, Joel Heck being one, if you've heard of the Chronological Lewis. I only checked his latest edition. I didn't send him a message, which I will, to see if maybe he has something he hadn't put out yet. But he doesn't have a date for it. I checked with Brenton Dickinson out of Canada, and then I forgot to check with Devin Brown to see if maybe he had any information, because he's also is well versed. But anyway, in terms of the education, the key idea is have a twisted view of democracy again. So, there's these overlaps here. To create a distorted connection between treating others equally and being equal. There's a difference. This leads to the I'm as good as you mindset, which creates a new education where dunces and idlers must not be made to feel inferior to intelligent and industrious pupils. This is in the 31st paragraph. Then, as a result, these differences between pupils must be disguised in the 32nd one. Then over time, this will result in the virtual abolition of education because, quote, all incentives to learn and all penalties for not learning will vanish. I don't know, maybe someone has written a piece on the abolition of education. Of course, Lewis's book, The Abolition of Man, is quite well known. All right, emotion, a lengthy topic. We've already noted some with some of the other words, but I spent two 1-minute segments on it here. We combined the thoughts here. While various emotions are mentioned throughout the letters, and we've talked about some, the first time the word itself is used is in the second letter. Here, Screwtape underscores that the patient, excuse me, will become much less dependent on emotion if he survives that initial dryness successfully. And this will mean he's more difficult to tempt. This is from the 3rd paragraph. Later in the 7th letter, Screwtape proposes to Wormwood that he could utilize an emotional crisis in the patient's life in relation to making him an uneasy convert to patriotism. This is in the 3rd paragraph. When the law of undulation is mentioned or introduced in the 8th letter, 2nd paragraph, we learn how the devils can play on one's emotions during predictable highs and lows in life. Additionally, during a discussion of being in love in the 18th letter, in the 7th paragraph, it is suggested that humans allow, quote, a storm of emotion, close quote, to rule their choices in relationships. Then 3 other times, Lewis talks about emotion in a certain way. In this 26th letter, Wormwood is educated on twisting the idea of unselfishness, I noted before, to his advantage, when people's emotional resources have died away and their spiritual resources have not yet grown. Then a secret grudge against the other will result, and this is in the 4th paragraph. In the 29th letter, Screwtape underscores the fact that when people like Wormwood's patient is, quote, in the thick of the danger, close quote, then pressure, quote, makes them prone to any violent emotion. That's in the 3rd paragraph. 30th letter, during a discussion of real, and if you've read the Screwtape, you can appreciate what is said there. Wormwood is informed on how to take advantage of the emotional effect of something factual that results in controlling how they react to their experiences. This is in the 4th paragraph. Eternity. This, of course, relates to time, and so there's many things you could cross-reference with that, but we're just focusing on eternity and some elements there. A brief reference is made in the 2nd letter, but it's the 15th letter that the main point of understanding eternity is shared with Wormwood. And here again, you have to be careful, and there could be some different perspectives in terms of of Christian theology, but it's interesting the way it is presented here. That is, the cornerstone thought is that humans live in time, but God destines them to eternity. He also wants people to attend chiefly to the present and to eternity. This is from the second paragraph of the 15th letter. And Screwtape also notes that when a person is reflecting on eternity, he is actually thinking of God, and I got underlined here, which means being concerned with him, which of course the him is God. Then the devil's business in the third paragraph we find is to keep them away from the eternal and from the present. What's presented here is not probably debated. I'm just in my mind thinking about some other elements that Lewis talks about God and God being outside of time, which certain Christian philosophers might have differing views, but for this material it's not much debate that I can think of. He also points that the past can be similar to eternity, but the future is least like it. And so that can be used to their advantage. Faith. Okay, it's tongue-in-cheek here. Oh, Screwtape can't twist faith. No way, right? One of the two important tasks held, according to the fifth letter, is to undermine faith. Well, duh. A very key way of doing this is getting the patient to treat his faith as a means, with the world being an end. We could spend all day on that one if we wanted to, huh? Letter 7 expands this with Screwtape proclaiming this is done when one's religion becomes merely part of the cause, in which Christianity is valued chiefly because of the excellent arguments it can produce. That is in favor of what they're advocating for. Again, we could camp here and I'm just going to dig deeper hole that of things that one could spend all day on if they wanted to. In the 25th letter, this is where Screwtape shares about his patient who practiced mere Christianity. Did you know mere Christianity? I have a separate handout at the end of some different facts, but the word mere Christianity is introduced first in the Screwtape letters, in case you didn't know. Now, of course, that's not original with Lewis, but nevertheless, that's in the first paragraph of the 25th letter. But here, Screwtape says a person's faith can be made less effective if tempters can add something to it and make that thing the most important part of the person's religion. Fatigue. If you're not tired already, by the end of the day you will. Let's see how the devil can use that to his advantage. The devil's use of fatigue is first mentioned in the 17th letter. Wormwood learns about it in relation to virtue in general and chastity in particular. And of course, I spoke about chastity, and if you're going to the YouTube channel, it's the 6th Screwtape Saturday. The most that is said, though, about fatigue is actually in the 30th letter, where Screwtape notes that moderate fatigue is a more effective condition than absolute exhaustion for temptations. Because, as you, I'm sure, have experienced, when you're absolutely exhausted, not much can tempt you. But if you're just kind of like a little wore out, and anyway. More in the 30th letter here. Here, Screwtape is instructed further about the importance of using false hopes to produce the best results from this condition. And then hope is something that we won't get into today, but it's covered in more detail in my book. And there's the entry there. Take a screenshot if you're watching the video here. The 30th letter, though, in terms of what we're speaking of, fatigue, is also mentioned. And here's where one could probably get into a side discussion about whether or not that is true or not, but Lewis just puts it out there. Says fatigue make women talk more and men talk less. Okay, so with that is what, and then the sample here, pacing myself here. Again, there's the takeaways separate one. There's extra copies of the green sheet here about some of the main themes, and then the sample of the book, and so a few copies here. But I did want to take a few more minutes and then allow for some Q&A here. One of the things in terms of the pull-out handout that has the main themes of each of the letters. I do have a separate section. It is in part 3 of the book where, there we go, where you see, if you look here, letter 6, maximum uncertainty and concentric circles. So if you've read the book a few times, you go, oh, where is that thing at? This resource can help you remember. Well, and further in the book, which I guess I should be unapologetic here. I'm promoting it a lot here. But if you do ebooks, I want to say it's definitely under $10. I'm selling that's not a hardback, but the paperback here for $15. I think it's slightly more online. But anyway, one of the things then is years ago I was doing a Bible study, and I went ahead and elaborated on other things, like this is something that the book has to where it goes into more detail. So if you have read the Screwtape letters, it's like, you could use this resource if you're like taking a college course, and this could be like the Cliff Notes, but that's not the way you're wanting to use it. This is after you've originally read and wanting to learn more and such. So this gives into some more detail. I'm not going to read through, but just to note here, I'll usually have like 6 or 7 bullet points about what's going on in the letter. So it's a nice summary. So that's another feature. And then the 11th letter, likewise, this is the one where he mainly just talks about laughter and the joke, fun, the joke proper, or humor, and flippancy. And so I give a summary of that. Again, it helped to help you appreciate it more, not as a substitute for reading the book itself. Okay, well, here are a couple things then, though, in terms of some main stuff. I'm going to do 3 misquotes related to Screwtape in a moment, and then probably go ahead and end with Q&A, and then I got a long list of other quotes. The facts might just go for the handout and leave it at that, but maybe show a couple slides there. But in case you need it reminding here, Lewis says in the first edition preface, there are 2 equal and opposite errors into which our race fall about the devils. One is to disbelieve in their existence. The other is to believe and to feel an excessive and unhealthy interest in them. Then I noted about how when the Screwtape letters first appeared, in the second preface that came out in the 1961 edition, someone protested. If you haven't read it, it's quite humorous here. Again, the letters just appeared. There was a thing the week before, coming next week, if I'm not mistaken, and then boom, the first letter, Screwtape letters, says Screwtape letters 1, and boom. Like, what's going on there? So understandably, someone who was caught off guard, he withdrew his subscription on the grounds that much of the advice of these letters seemed to him to be not only erroneous, but positively diabolical. Then Lewis did try to also answer questions that have been raised. And he goes on to note that he's not trying to show what the devils are really like, but how temptation is used. And so, but that's the vehicle here. But anyway, he does elaborate some here, that there are no uncreated being except God. God has no opposite. This is very important. The devil is the opposite of angel, only as bad man is the opposite of good man. Satan, the leader or dictator of the devils, is opposite not of God, but of Michael. And sorry about that, I didn't advance the slide there. So that is in the, well, it's not this edition here, but in 1961, the Screwtape letters and Screwtape Proposes a Toast first came out, a new edition, and now we have the revised edition. And then there's an essay collection called Screwtape Proposes a Toast. I never did do this on my website, but I did it, I think, somewhat as a guest article in Brenton Dickinson's. He has a Pilgrim in Narnia website. Anyway, about Till We Have Less Confusing Titles or something like that was what I called it, to where in the science fiction, the Ransom trilogy, there are, in the second and third book, there are a couple other titles. One's an abridged, One has a different title that's not an abridged, and then you have essays that were changed after, and anyway, confusing titles here. But anyway, I wanted to give you a chance to look at that. Then in the 1961, in terms of clarifying what Lewis had paid a compliment to, about, oh, you must have had years of, moral and aesthetic theology. But he says, no, the letters came about because there is an equally reliable, though less credible, way of learning how temptation works. My heart, I need no others, showeth me the wickedness of the ungodly. And this is a rendering of Psalm 36:1 from the Book of Common Prayer, according to a footnote from the annotated edition of the Screwtape letters. And also that footnote notes the reflections on the Psalms, chapter 12 also speaks of that. And here's where I noted earlier about, it was fun, but it got really dry. This is what Lewis had said. He said, though I'd never written anything more easily, I never wrote with less enjoyment. The ease came, no doubt, from the fact that the device of diabolical letters, once you have thought of it, exploits itself spontaneously. Oops. Dramatic pause since I didn't advance that. I'll do it this way here. But though it was easy to twist one's mind into the diabolical attitude, it was not fun, or not for long. The strain produced a sort of spiritual cramp. The work into which I had to project myself, which while I spoke through Screwtape, was all dust, grit, thirst, and itch. And then he goes on, he says, it would have smothered my readers if I had prolonged it. Now, of course, other individuals have come up with variations of the Screwtape letters, and then as we'll see in a moment, some people trying to be clever, put something out there and say it's Screwtape as in a tip of the hat. But, some of them are not really very, very, very good. All right, my last main thing, and then Q&A and all that. That is warnings about fake Screwtape letters. Dun, da, da, da. The first. No one remembers this. Let's see, did I do it this way to advance it? Yes. This came out in May of 2020. Does anyone remember May of 2020? That was a long time ago. The quote begins by asking, and how did you manage to bring so many souls into hell? And this was one of a picture, and it's, I forgot where this picture came from, but it was at it, the little masks, because of COVID going on. But anyway, then it goes on as a dialogue, but as you read it, it's like, no way was it written back in the 40s. It's written, but it says it's from the Screwtape letters, the devil's letters to his nephew. And you're going like, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's like, well, wait a minute. That phrase, and so I found, and I'm going on my original research. I didn't go back confirming my own original research, but if you take this Spanish, does anyone speak Spanish here? Maybe you can confirm. Okay, so this is supposed to, if you go from the Spanish into English, this is the title, The Devil's Letters to His Nephew, which if someone who's better with Spanish, but either which way, someone's getting confused, and Lewis did not write this material. Try not to editorialize. All right, second. Then not long after that, in March of 2020, I warned members of the Confirming C.S. Lewis quotation Facebook group about a short conversation between Satan and Jesus that began with Satan saying, "I will cause anxiety, fear, and panic." And so someone was asking me, where is this from? And so, March 22nd, I'm kind of patting myself on the back here. And then 8 days, okay, I'm sorry, I first show this slide. So this is the actual thing. So this is like, that's supposed to be an entire Screwtape letter? Yeah, they're a little bit longer.
That's from the Jesus letters.
All right, so
Third Galatians.
8 days later, in other words, I scooped Snoops. Snoops even came out and noted that they actually found some additional stuff that I didn't know. I was just able to confirm it wasn't Lewis. But they tracked it down to someone who posted, I never did, I think I did try to reach out to this person back originally, but anyway, they posted this without citing any other source, and then someone associated with Lewis somehow, very loose connection. Anyway, all right. Let's see. Okay, now I hadn't advanced it here. Okay, so the third one, again, we could spend hours. We're not and springboard off of this with current events. But in 2016, there was, my dear Wormwood, be sure that the patient remains completely fixated on politics. Doesn't happen today, does it? That was stuff people did back in 2016. Anyway, that opening statement is part of a lengthier one. It, as far as I could find out, it debuted in October of 2016. And this is, again, the entire letter. So we have it starting out with my dear Wormwood, and then Uncle Screwtape. That's the only similarity between this and the Screwtape letters, those words. Everything else is not. Oops, did that? Okay. And so, yes, he didn't say at the end of a letter, keep up the good work. And most Screwtape letters is between the 800 to 1,000 words. This is only just, oh, I must have an auto thing on that. Okay, yeah. That's what happens when you copy from another resource there. Okay, so that is the third and final. Someone actually did send me something, which I didn't take the time. There's another Facebook group that someone added me as an admin that someone created on C.S. Lewis quotes. And they tried to share something that said it was from the Screwtape letters, and I just said, no, it's not, and I screenshotted it and haven't shared it because I don't want it to be someone that, because apparently no one else has been sharing it. So it's like, I'm gonna hold it and not, you know, it's like when you announce it, here's another fake Screwtape letter, someone's gonna look at it and go, oh, that's Screwtape, and they're sharing, anyway. Thank you very much. The Screwtape facts, I guess I did want to share, I did share this already, about the annotated edition. The Screwtape letters was dedicated to Tolkien. He didn't appreciate that. That's listed in the handout. The original manuscript, Sister Penelope, that's in your handout, so I'm going to go kind of fast. That one's in your handout. The idea came to him in July of 1940, which is not in your handout, and so he's writing to his brother about that. Marvel, this is in your handout, that you'll get in a moment, but the Marvel edition of the Screwtape letters, Marvel Comics. And then last thing, yes?
Was the Marvel thing fairly close and accurate?
It is have you ever bought a book you never read? We won't ask you to raise your hand. So I haven't read it, but there's someone else who did. I mean, you could easily pick out any one letter and know, oh, okay, they're paraphrasing or they shorten it. So it's at best not an abridged. At best, it's an abridged version of the Screwtape letters. But it is very colorful. So, and then one last fact, and then I'll grab a handout for someone to pass out. Andy Serkis, if you didn't know, who voiced Gollum, of course, in the Lord of the Rings. Focus on the Family did a adaptation, meaning they didn't use all the exact words from the Screwtape letters, but it was approved by the Lewis company. And so he voiced the Screwtape in the radio drama theater.
Approved by Lewis?
Approved, yeah.
By Lewis?
No, I'm sorry, approved by his estate. His estate. But, did I bring it up here? No. There is another play that I want to say James Forsyth. I'll grab it maybe if I do it quickly here. There was a play version, a script that Lewis approved. but if you read his letters, he didn't think very much of it. But no, in terms of the focus on the family, the Lewis estate approved it. In fact, one of the things I didn't note with the annotated edition of the Screwtape letters, Paul McCusker did the annotations. Anyone heard of Adventures in Odyssey? Okay, yeah, yes. So anyway, all right, so with that, I'm going to grab the handouts for the extra facts, but that's the end of my talk, and I'll take any questions. But thank you for being the audience. I'll find the play in a minute here. So any questions? Yes.
I'm really intrigued by that 82,
Take one in fast.
72, 62. But preface,
Yes.
that's a different preface than the 61 preface?
Yes. It is like,
61 preface is for a new edition of the book. It does not include the code.
and yeah, this one has just we'll get into numbers here in a minute, but this is just a preface to the Toast essay itself.
To the what?
To the Toast essay itself. In other words, the lost preface is not a preface to the Screwtape letters itself, but just to the essay. Yes,
And that was supposedly written in 62, right before Lewis died.
Right.
And there's no evidence of it existing anywhere, and heck, or nobody else except the printed copy, right? I mean, there's no manuscript.
Right. Yes. I was checking with Brenton about it.
Sound like Lewis.
Well, yeah, it is interesting. Now, I forget the original source in terms of it was known, or Brenton listed between 61 and 63, but the actual, here, this is the photocopy of it, you want to pass it back to him. And then you can look at the book here during break. So this is something that when he was working on an essay collection, and so when they went to publish, Screwtape proposes a Toast essay collection. So it's just that essay and other essays. It's not the Screwtape letters at all. It actually then uses the last couple paragraphs and a few sentences from the one before that from the 61 preface and presents it as a preface to the Toast. So at the risk of getting confused, so we actually have 5 prefaces out there in terms of what you could number them. The original preface, the 61 preface to the second edition, then the Toast essay collection that just takes part of that second one and claims it to be a preface to the Toast. Then you have this revised edition of the Screwtape letters that has the actual, that someone had to verify, but further research could be done, that is just to the Toast essay. And then, I know Joe and others may be familiar, then there is, and I did print out a thing, and I guess I'll set it over on the table, I have it in a notebook, that Brenton Dickinson was the first to publish. He, myself, and Charlie Starr had seen at the Wade Center in Chicago. Lewis had a different preface where he tied Screwtape letters into the Ransom trilogy. And so that would then be a 5th type of preface. But anyway, that's getting down into the weeds, but very fascinating for those of us who really enjoy this book.